to Imaginative Visions Journeys, where creators from the entertainment world discuss their journey to turning their dreams into reality. With your host, Justin D. Williams.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to Imaginative Visions Journeys. This is episode 1, which is called Flip Over to Side B. I am your host, Justin D. Williams. I am the founder and the creator of Imaginative Visions, and I'm going to get into my personal journey as the story and as the season progresses. But just to give you an overview of what Imaginative Visions Journeys is about, this is a podcast that we are going to showcase and interview people from the entertainment world that's on the indie scene and that is also in mainstream. And we're talking about the journeys of how they became who they are. What were some of the roadblocks, their origins? When did they find their passion? It's going to be a very fun, very informative, and hopefully the goal is to be a very inspirational show for everybody. So without further ado, I'm going to be introducing my first guest for episode 1. He is a video game developer hail from FarRock, Queens, New York. He has released several video games, 2 on mobile, 211CK, Die in the Dark, which is on PC, and his other mobile game, which is entitled Save My Cereal. And he has an upcoming game coming out later this year called FarRock Dodgeball. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Keenan Williams. No relation. Thank you, Keenan. How you doing?
Oh man, great intro, man. I appreciate being your first guest. It's gonna be a great show already. I can tell.
Yes. And just thank you for coming on. And we have a lot to discuss here. So we are going to really kick this thing off right off from the jump. We're going to go to our first segment of the show, which is called Origins. Now, with Origins, we're going to talk about how did you find your passion? When was the exact moment of the birth of you becoming a game developer? But first, let's talk a little bit about your background, you coming from FarRock, Queens, which, just doing my research and obviously just a little bit of history. Me and Keenan grew up together. So you guys probably saw us on various podcasts over the years. So he definitely had to be my first guest. But growing up in FarRock, Queens, statistically, there's not much game developers in FarRock, Queens. So let's talk about the origin of that, knowing the environment of FarRock. When did you decide that you were going to become a game developer, and when did that passion really spark?
It's so funny because they kind of tie into my childhood. So growing up, and for those who don't know, in Far Rockaway, Queens, is probably everybody's familiar with Jamaica, Queens, and Queensbridge from 50 Cent and Nas and things like that. And right behind those two hoods, I guess you could say, or areas in Queens, is Far Rockaway when it comes to violence, guns, poverty, etc. We just don't have as many famous rappers as those areas do. So that being said, grew up like the statistical kid, father not around, mother poor, and we had to really struggle. And again, we, like I always say before in other interviews, we didn't have plethora of money and all these video games. So when we wanted a Christmas gift or a birthday gift and we requested a video game, we knew we had to do our homework and do our research on what video game to get, because we weren't getting another one for a whole nother year, pretty much. So that actually led to me falling in love with the video game industry as a whole. Because again, I had to do my due diligence and understand what these video games are. And in turn, that led me to a gentleman who no longer with us, James Gordon, his last name, at our school, who was like the resident video game, aficionado. He knew everything. He knew all the cheat codes. He had all the games. So a game would come out, and I would be like, hey, should I get this game or should I get that game? And I would talk to him, and not only did he tell me what he felt the better game, but in addition to that, he would also somehow sneak in some of the technical side of things. He would say, this game is better because I feel like the polygon count is not as high, and they use it more for the frame rate this, and he was using all these words that I never heard of. And so at that point, not only started to fall in love with the video game industry as a whole, because again, it was a way to, get away from the craziness of the hood that we were in. But it also it was a cheap, believe it or not, escape. You know what I mean? Because you can take $10 or $20, buy a video game, and they can last you for hours of entertainment. But kind of going back to James, I was very fortunate because he wasn't just a normal video game guy who played them. While he was telling me recommendations, he would talk to me about it. But I think to answer your question directly, the thing that there was a moment that really shifted for me that made me think, okay, this is what I want to do for a living. And it was actually while watching basketball, believe it or not. Just like most kids in Queens, for those who don't know, you can look it up. Queens probably has the most NBA point guards out of any area in the world. When we look at Mark Jackson, Kenny Anderson, Kenny Smith, you can kind of just keep going on and on. There are so many great point guards, just in general, point guards that have gone to the NBA. Skip to my Lou, how did I forget him? That has gone to the NBA from Queens. We're not even talking about Lamar Odom, Ron Artest, and all the great NBA players in general, right? So I always grew up wanting to be a New York City point guard who went to the NBA. You know what I mean? Queens point guard who went to the NBA. That was my main goal. But I remember one day I was watching the Chicago Bulls, Michael Jordan just came back, first Orlando Magic, Penny Hardaway. And they were interviewing, they were talking about Penny Hardaway's grandmother. And the grandmother actually said, Penny, she's the one who gave the name Penny. His name was Anthony Hardaway. And she said, Penny loves basketball so much that he used to play outside when it rained. In the morning, he would skip breakfast to go play. At night, he would skip dinner and he would go play. And I thought to myself, like, I want to make it to the NBA, but I don't love basketball that much. If it starts raining, I'm going home. You know what I mean? When my friends leave the court, I'm out of here. So I started to think, what is the one thing that I love that I would skip a meal for, that I would, completely leave my family or something for? And it was actually video games, creating video games and just the love of playing them. And so from then on, I started to say to myself, okay, I need to start looking at this as a career. And then I went back to James, and then I started to talk to James about some of my ideas, technical ideas about the proper ways to use polygon counts and some slick ways to use pre-rendered backgrounds and things like that. Then at that point, I started to say, Keenan, you're on to something, So that was the exact moment there.
So James was basically kind of your guru into the world of gaming. Like you said, James also knew things about development. Like he had knowledge, about behind the scenes of the makings of the video games. So elaborate a little bit more with your relationship with James, of how he kind of put you, like, do you remember like an exact conversation or moment or game, to rephrase, do you remember the exact game that made you go, you know what, this is something I want to have something for myself with my name on it?
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. It was actually Resident Evil 1.
Wow, okay.
Up until that point, like I said, James and I were the very few Sega Saturn kids in the neighborhood and in school and things like that. And so we really bonded on that. And again, I remember him, I always asked the simple question to him over and over about polygon count, because that was such a big deal during the 32-bit era. This was a big deal. So Virtua Cop, I remember coming out. Virtua Cop was one of my favorite games. And I remember I went to James and I said, James, I started to get video game ideas. And I was thinking to myself, one day I'm going to make a video game and the characters on the floor are not going to disappear after you kill them. And I said, James, why are they disappearing right after you kill them? And he said, listen, there's a certain number of polygons that the Sega Saturn can hold at once. So they have to disappear for new ones to come. There's only going to be a certain number of characters on screen. And to kind of get back to Resident Evil, when I told James, I said, well, James, you taught me about the polygon count with Virtua Cop, but I noticed in Resident Evil that they're using way more polygons per character than a game like Virtua Cop. I don't understand. How is this possible? You told me that there's only a limit. And James broke it down and said, listen, if you look at the backgrounds of Resident Evil 1, they're pre-rendered. So they're pretty much taking 2D images and using all of the polygons on the actual characters. And then I started to say, wow, that's genius. So then I started to really think as a developer, ways that you can actually manipulate tech and manipulate the systems to actually get the product that you want.
Wow. So
Yeah.
from that, so we're gonna jump into a little bit more of your origins. Now you said Resident Evil was the game, but is there any developer that made you go, you know what? Even it doesn't matter what it is in your past or maybe in college and high school. Was there a particular developer or company with their games or with their original IP, intellectual property for those who don't know what IP is, was that made you go, you know what? I need to study this person or look into that.
Easily two. I'm gonna give you two, not just one.
Okay.
And I had both of these guys on my wall. I had my basketball posters, and right next to them were actually programmers. And the first one is Yuji Naka. And for those who don't know, Yuji Naka he's pretty much the creator of Sonic. Not only was he the lead designer, but also lead programmer as well. And the reason why I love Yuji Naka and the Sonic team so much is because Sonic 3 to this day is still one of my maybe top 3 video games of all time. I love that game so much.
A true classic.
But yeah, I mean, it's such a classic. But the reason why I love him so much is the transition. Not only did he make the Sonic games, but he also transitioned into Knights. And then after Knights, he transitioned into Burning Ranges, which is another hidden gem. So the Sonic team just showed me that these guys are very versatile and talented. But in addition to that, also had right next to him was a picture of Yu Suzuki. Now, Yu Suzuki is really, Yuji Naka was first, but Yu Suzuki he replaced him as my number one. Now he's a little bit off, but back then he was like the Kojima to me of game development. And again, for those who aren't familiar, Yuji Naka led a team called AM2. Mm-hmm. A lot of rumors about why this team is called AM2, but the rumor that I heard and loved and I ran with is that the entire team of Sega developers at the time used to come in, and I think they used to start at like 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. And his team would work so hard, they outworked everybody, that they would stay to the AM hours at night. So they would come in at 9 a.m. and they would leave at like 2 a.m. That's how hard they were working. So people around Sega would just say, hey, that's the AM team right there. This guy's going to be here till 2 a.m. probably. And so they took that and called themselves AM2 and AM1. And then they eventually became a bunch of AMs. And then I think it actually stood for something else. But that was the rumor that was originally how it started and how they started to break up the teams, because his guys will work so late. We can't work on a game together if I'm leaving at 5 p.m. and you're leaving at 2 a.m. So they broke them off, and they just created the team AM2, led by Yu Suzuki, created some of the most amazing games. When we look at far back from Super Harrier, Hang On, I think a Space Harrier, bringing it up to Virtua Fighter, which is obviously he's a little bit more known for. And then later on, Shenmue. But I mentioned the Virtua Cop series. They were part of that as well. These guys just pretty much did all the arcade games for Sega. But again, back to versatility. When I looked at his resume, his catalog, I mean, just 80s classic games, 90s, 2000s, and even now, Shenmue 3. So he's just, to me, unbelievable. We know the story with Shenmue with the budget, and so he's not maybe a great manager of money, but he's a hell of a developer.
Wow. So these were the guys that put you on the path. Now, speaking of the origins, as we're continuing, what were the first steps that you actually took to becoming a game developer? Did you go to a particular school? Did you take a course? What was the first major step towards your journey?
So I'm gonna give you first 4 steps, pretty much. The first step, again, back to James, just kind of reconnecting with him. One of the biggest things that he gave me was my first step was a video game magazine called Next Generation. And so that video game magazine wasn't just like Game Pro or Game Informer where they gave reviews and kind of previews, but they did that a little bit, but they mostly focused on the tech side and the development side. So they would literally just interview developers, and every maybe November, they would have in the middle of it, it would have this card that you had to fill out, like this whole pamphlet for the video game developers conference. And I remember as a kid, I was like, oh my God, like I would read this and then I would see these pamphlets and I'm saying, oh my God, there's a conference that all the video game developers come in together and they talk about making games. Like this is a dream. So step one was getting that magazine. Step two was actually going to college. And so at that point, I started to think to myself, I need to go to a video game college. So I actually moved to San Francisco to pursue my career in video game development. But I also went to school for game design. I was the second class at the Art Institute of Technology of San Francisco for game design. So that was number two, to go to college for it. And number three was going to GDC and actually taking classes and meeting people. And I would say the fourth was educating myself. And I did that in various different ways. You know, for instance, when I first moved to San Francisco, you know, couldn't get a job in video game development. So I was doing, you know, jobs here and there. But what I would do was every lunch break, I would bring this huge book written by, it was written by three guys. One of the guys in the book was actually Bobby Kotick, who is the CEO of Activision. He actually helped write this book. And it was a thick book like this big. And it went over every aspect of video game development. I'm talking about game design, programming, production, advertising, anything you can name. I mean, this book was probably like 30 chapters. And what I would do is every lunch break, I would just read a chapter, read a little bit more, read a little bit more, read a little more until I finished it. And that led me to, that was the first step of my self-education.
All right. Wow. So self-education and then all those steps. So you mentioned GDC. Can you explain a little bit of what that is for our viewers who are not really familiar with the gaming world? Because GDC, I mean, I know you, but the people who are watching this on YouTube and imaginativevisions.com probably have no idea what GDC is. So, and I know GDC is a very big, intricate part of your journey and, you know, what you're doing with your development now. So can you explain a little bit what GDC is and how important that is to developers?
Yeah, GDC is the, like I said, Game Developers Conference. And it's, while it is a video game show and they do have shows, like they do have like a floor of like, you can go play video games. That's not really the focus. You know, they have that, we go there, we play some games for fun. But the main focus is the classes. And so what happens is, Justin, is 4 days of back to back to back to back to back to back to back classes from like 7 a.m. to like 5 pretty much. And it, again, covers every aspect of video games taught by developers as well. And so that's the main thing there. And the great thing about it as well is that they have award shows. They have networking events, you know, so you'll be able to meet a lot of people. In addition to that, you'll be able to maybe hopefully receive some awards for your game and learn a ton. Every time I go every year, it's held annually in San Francisco, usually around March. This year, because of COVID, they pushed it to July. But yeah, I mean, it's a must for video game developers. And I think anyone in any industry has to find something similar because A, it's great for networking, but you learn a ton.
Whew. It sounds like already from just your origins. So let's just recap before we get into the next segment.
Yeah.
You get introduced to gaming. Obviously, you get your first system. You meet James. James introduces you to a lot of the behind the scenes aspects of video gaming. You fall in love with it. Self-taught. Now, the self-taughting you, was that just reading books or you just literally going online, practicing coding and just doing it that way? What was that about?
It was all of it. I mean, you know, and when I say self-taught, first of all, it still doesn't stop. I mean, I'm still learning things, but you know, self-taught, and we'll get a little bit more into the struggles, but a little later. But like that started in 2003. Me reading that book. Okay. Fast forward into like 2015. I remember working in Manhattan, and what I would do was, speaking of self-taught, just to kind of give people an idea, what I would do is, you know, we're in a digital age, so I downloaded Udemy, and what I did was I downloaded the courses on my phone. So it's like an online course thing for people who don't know. And so what I would do is every day I would take the train like 45 minutes to my job. And so what I would do is I would study programming 45 minutes to work. Then I would think about things while I was at work, 45 minutes back home. And then when I got off work back home, I was so excited to try the things that I learned. And then I would try those things there. So again, you have to use the time that you have to make, that's on your normal job or your school. You have to set aside your lunch breaks. You have to set aside your travel time. You have to set aside the time after work or after school to focus on learning your craft. And that's what I did.
Whew. One hell of a journey so far. But there's
Man.
no origins and there's no every journey. And we're going to go into the next segment now because we have an idea of Keenan's journey, who Keenan was, where Keenan came from, his passion, the birth of how he became a game developer, what sparked it, his influences. But now, like any journey, we have our next segment, which is called roadblocks. Now, every journey has struggles. Every journey has moments where you have a plan and a plan doesn't go as well.
Mhm.
So, Keenan, can you whatever you're willing to tell us? Obviously, if it's too much, don't.
Never.
So, what were some of the first beginning roadblocks, and then tell us some of the roadblocks? So, we're gonna do the roadblocks of the past, roadblocks of the present, and some roadblocks that you're starting to see already with your new project. Like, what are some of the frustrations and struggles with your new project, FarRock Dodgeball? So let's start first with the roadblocks of the past that were kind of preventing you from getting to where you are now.
Well, I'm gonna give you 3 good ones. And the first one, again, nothing too personal. The first one is James. So I had somebody who was a mentor, somebody who I could always go to for advice. Like how amazing is that you have an industry and you have somebody who you can call and say, hey, what about this? And then he had a group of people that he deferred to as well. So what happened was when he died, I didn't have anybody to go to anymore. And then I didn't have his network of friends as well. So I was like a fish out of water. I was like, I don't know where to go. So that was the first roadblock. The second biggest roadblock that I faced after was when I said I'm going to move to San Francisco from New York. And that roadblock was tough because I had $150 in my pocket. I called the airlines up, right? No, excuse me, I had about $250 at the time. Okay. I called the airline, right? I'm like 18. I said, I'm going to California. I called the airlines and I said, hey, I want an airplane ticket to California. This is in like 2002, it wasn't Expedia and all that stuff. And they said, yeah, okay, it's going to be about 600. I said, 600? So I got $200 on me, and she said, nothing I can do. You want it next week, right? So I said, oh boy. So I said, all right, I got to take a train. So I bought $100 Amtrak train ticket from left in Manhattan and was that Penn Station or Penn Station.
Penn Station.
Yeah, and left from Penn Station all the way to Oakland because there's a stop in Oakland actually. It doesn't even stop in San Francisco. And so luckily I have family in Sacramento, and so they came down, and it takes about 2-hour drive. So they took a 2-hour drive, met me in Oakland, picked me up. And then I lived with them for like a month. And then I still was like holding my money. You know what I mean? I was holding tight. So then I went to go live on my own in San Francisco, had $150 in my pocket. And at this point, I'm starting school. So I'm learning, I'm trying to, pursue my career. So I had to take that 150 and flip it. And that me flipping it meant literally for dinner every night. It was a gas station I used to live next to. So I used to go to the gas station, and one night I would have a bag of chips for dinner. Next night I used to love these little muffins they had. It's like $2 though. At the time it was a lot for me. It was like $2.25 or something. The bag of chips was like $1. So I was like, all right, this is good. Get 2 of those, I'm good. So I used to love this little muffin. I remember I could still taste it. It was like the strawberry muffin. Let's get the muffin, $2, and that was my dinner. And then if I had a little extra money, I would get a little thing of milk. Milk was like $3 or whatever at the time, and I would drink that. And I did that for like 6 months while I was going to school, pursuing my passion. And so eventually, got a little better job, and then slowly started to, build up. But again, that's why I tell people, me, Justin, I'm like, no excuses. And the reason why I have that attitude is because I did it. I moved across the country with $150 because I paid $100 for the Amtrak ticket. Then I had $150 left, and I had to hold it. And there was no help. So I was on my own with that. And I think the third thing came a lot later, and that was really just, and we'll kind of talk more about this later, but really putting together a team, because when I initially thought of this idea, and we'll talk more about this a little later, but getting a team together and getting funding is really, really hard when you are coming from environments that I'm coming from, where we don't really have the same education as others, so I might type a business document and have typos in it or have certain errors, and back then, again, we didn't have all these tools and things like that. So I think the transition into the business side of game development, that was probably a big struggle. And that's something that I'm still going through even to this day, because you keep going up higher and higher levels. There's new challenges.
And some of those challenges, me being a gamer myself, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later, is that the industry is always evolving, not to mention with graphics. Like, that's the one thing a lot of developers I talk to from time to time when I go to these indie shows, such as Play NYC. Some of them always say some of the biggest struggles is the fact that graphics are always evolving, gameplay, different styles are evolving. And then when these gamers have a niche and they have a certain look that they like, they easily dismiss something when it's not up to the quote unquote latest gaming graphic standards. And you being a single developer team, like you were saying, like you're doing it by yourself. You do not have a team. I want to stress that out to all our listeners out there. He's doing this by himself. There is no team. Everything he's doing with his 211CK, Die in the Dark, FarRock Dodgeball, Save My Cereal was all Keenan. Now, you mentioned that you took a train from New York to Cali with only $150. And then you were just eating muffins.
And they were good.
And you were, was it a point also you were staying at a hotel too, right? You were.
Yeah. That was right after that, actually. Yeah.
So talk a little bit more about that as well. Like that.
Well, that was really hard. That was like one of the hardest points in my life, because so basically what happened was I was in school for game development, and here's why. So I was talking to you about how I had the $150 and I was struggling. So I found a little job, and it was part-time. It was only Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And my boss kept saying to me, Keenan, listen, he was from Queens actually too, so it was really cool. He kept saying, listen, I got hours for you, man. I got spots for you, but you're in school, so I need somebody who's dependable. Your schedule is changing, and you're in school for 5 days a week. I can't give you more hours. And it got to the point where I was like, I really need some more time. So I basically I was leaving school, and it got to the point where I found out my school was actually stealing money from me. And a lot of times we sign all these papers from student loans, right? We don't even think about it. So the school situation, they audited. I spoke to an auditor. They looked at the school information. They found out they was trying to steal like $5,000 from me or something like that. So we got it back, and then it got to the point where the dean was kind of at odds with me, and she was trying to pull some of my financial aid. And I was saying that we had these little like dorms. It wasn't really like dorms, but it was kind of like dorms. And she was like, "You got to go." And I was like, "When?" She was like, "You got to leave like, I think it was like 2 weeks or whatever." And I was like, ugh. And I didn't have, again, I was working part-time. My check, people don't understand, my check was like $230 every 2 weeks. Oof. That's what I was living on. Again, I'm not living with mom, I'm living on my own. So I was paying for college. So I was under all the stress. And then she's trying to like raise my tuition and all this stuff. And the dean, so I was like, you know what? I'm out. And I had to leave school, and I had to leave the dorms as well. So I had nowhere to go. So at that point, again, because I don't have family or anything out here. So at that point, I had to just go into a hotel. And again, I didn't have a lot of money. So this isn't the Ritz-Carlton or the Hyatt, or, you know what I mean? This isn't a fancy hotel. This hotel, I don't even know the name of it, but it's like it was a hotel right next to the red light district in San Francisco, which is kind of like the porn area, you can say. Very crummy. It was to the point where the room was probably like literally, I mean, it's hard to show you here, but the room was super small.
Mm.
It had no showers in the room, no bathroom. If you wanted to take a piss or take a shower, you had to go into the hallway. And so I was in there. I remember every morning we would wait online to take a shower, just to kind of give you an idea of like, you know. And so what happened was when I quit, when I left school, I was fortunately I was able to get full-time work.
Mm.
And so at that point, even though I was living in a hotel, I started to slowly kind of build my money up while I was out of school. And then eventually, after living in a hotel for about a month, um, that was getting really a lot of pressure too, because it was starting to add up when my money was going to the hotel. And that's when I really was back to eat muffins and chips for dinner, you know. But eventually I wound up moving out the hotel and, you know, but yeah, it was really, really hard times.
And that's one thing I'm always fascinated with people's stories is there's you took, and this is going to be a major theme with our show, folks, is most of our guests that are going to be here, you're going to hear that they took a risk.
Mm-hmm.
You took a risk with $250. Well, then $150 because you had to get there. $150 in your pocket, in your account, and then just going to Cali because Cali is really game developed central because
Mm-hmm.
GDC, all of them is over there. So
Yeah.
that's like me, like that's like somebody going to New York, an actor going to New York because they have a dream of being in a Broadway show. So
Mm-hmm.
obviously you'll go to New York to try to make it there. So you went to Cali and you basically started your own little development company, which we're going to transition to now, which was Live Game Dev, which I believe was
Oh man.
your first. Yeah, I did my research, folks.
Oh man.
So I believe that was your first attempt of making your own indie game studio. So how did Live Game Dev turn into Side B, and what happened to Live Game Dev?
First of all, I want to say Justin, for the people, he really did his homework, because even though him and I are friends, we never even talk about that. I
No,
actually totally forgot.
no, never.
And I would say if you ever hear another interview with me, and Live Game Dev is mentioned, they got it from this interview, because this never talked about. Actually, I did 2 interviews last summer, and that was not mentioned, if you noticed. But anyway, yeah. So when I first moved to California, and I kind of got on my feet, you know, moved out the hotel, got on my feet. It's like, all right, I'm gonna start applying for jobs, and I started to notice that I would go on these interviews. Either they wouldn't call me back, or I would go on interviews and nobody would hire me. And I remember a recruiter actually said to me, he said, "Hey kid, you're really smart, but A, you don't have the experience. So, you know, you're not catch 22. If you don't have the experience, so no one's willing to give you the experience."
Mhm.
And he says, at this point, I mean, you're saying everything right on the interview. Your resume looks great. There's nothing I can do. And I said, you know what? Thank you. Because he sent me on like 5 interviews, you know, this recruiter said, don't worry about it. Just forget it. Thank you for your time. So I said, I'm done. At that point, I said, you know what? Let me focus on myself at this point. And I said, I can do this. I can really, you know, do my own thing. And so I started to think of like company names. And what happened was the company actually was called Live, L.I.V.E. And it stood
LIVE.
for, yeah, LIVE, Leaders of Innovative Visual Entertainment.
Ooh.
And the website was livegamedev.com. I don't even know where that goes if you type that in anymore. But anyway, so I started to say, okay, I wanted to create a innovative video game company that, again, just focused on like pushing the limits. But then I started to think to myself, you know, I need to put together a team. And the first thing you need on a team is you need to cover some of the places that you're weak, right? So when it comes to game design, programming, these are things that I always kind of just naturally picked up. But art is something that I never picked up. Like as a kid, I used to draw, but that was like years ago, and I never really loved it. So I got in touch with an artist. I forget actually where I met him from. This guy named Brian, I remember. And he was an amazing 3D modeler. I mean, this guy could just make anything. So I would give him all these hints of like, okay, I need you to make this, make this. And we would actually meet in the Metron in San Francisco every Wednesday. It was a Wednesday. We have a Wednesday meetings. And we were trying to create, at the time, which was going to be my first RPG, called Asilium. And Asilium is actually Melissa backwards, is actually my cousin's name. So anyway, we were working on that. And then I got to a point where he started to get financially stressed. I started to get busy at work. And I was like, I need to secure funding. So I started to just meet all these like people who could potentially fund the game and the product. And I began to just come on this circle for like 3 years of just meeting people, not falling through. You know, my designer actually quit, worked for Netflix, which was props to him. I hooked him up with a job at Rockstar. Actually, I had a recruiter who was trying to get me to work at Rockstar, and he actually took that job. So anyway, he wound up leaving, getting great jobs elsewhere. And I kept trying to get other people recruiting. And I was spinning my wheels, man. And I just felt like I wasn't going anywhere. And I would make these demos and they wouldn't go anywhere, make a demo, wouldn't go anywhere. And I was working on a game. Actually, I said, you know what, forget this. I'm gonna actually work on something by myself. And I was actually working on a game, a mobile game. This one, mobile games was like the biggest thing ever when iPhone first came out. Yeah. I was working on a game about, and for now, I called it Project I, because it never actually came out. It was just a project name. And Project I was about a game about a lady getting kidnapped by some psycho, and he locked her in his basement. And you're playing this lady, and you had to use your phone to like walk around and interact with things in the basement to get out the basement and then sneak out of his house. And then I started to think to myself, like, you know, what's going to happen if he catches her? And I was like, he'll probably beat her and all this, like, just crazy stuff. Then I started to go to GDC, and I'm looking at everyone else's games. I'm like, wow, these people have like games about like, you know, for like children and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't really like Rockstar was doing like hardcore games, but nobody's really dealing with like a woman getting beat, kidnapped and stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like that real hardcore stuff. Yeah, like real life. But like that's where we come from in FarRock. These are stories that we grew up with. So I started to think to myself, like, I said, number one, I'm done begging people for money to make my games. B, I'm done begging for jobs. C, I'm done begging artists and other people to collab with to work for me for free, because they would work a little bit and wouldn't finish it, and then I didn't have the money to anyway. So I said, I'm working A, by myself. B, I want to create games that nobody else is really creating, dealing with topics that nobody else is dealing with. I feel like a lot of the people in the video game industry were making like, you know, like back in the days we had a cassette, right? You had a side A of a cassette and a side B. And side A was the commercial song, you know, throw your hands in the air, everybody, you know, all the happy stuff. And I feel like the video game industry, 99% of that was side A's. And I said to myself, I'm going to be the company that makes something like a side B type style video game, where it's, because everybody knows when you turn the tape over back in the days, the side B had that one song that you just love and say, man, why isn't this on the radio? This is the best song on the album. You know, but it was too hardcore sometimes maybe too slow or too fast for the radio. And I said, I wanted to do that. So I was sitting in bed. I was in Oakland, actually. I was sitting in bed. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to call this side B, because that's what it is. The side B of gaming. And so it's side B gaming. And that's how I said, Live. It was too complex. People were like, I was at GDC. They said, what's your company name? Live, Live, what? Well, they were just confused. And I said, I needed a simple name, something that, you know what it is. And that's something that really represents me and my games. And that's where side B came from.
That's a journey right there, because you went from Live Game Dev, LIVE, and people didn't understand what was the company name. And this is something I also want to point out to people, is the importance of your brand. Side B gaming, as Keenan just explained it, is a brand. The way he described it is a brand. Live Game Dev, LIVE, live is such a common word. So when you think of a brand name or something to market, you got to think of something a little bit original and something not really used, but at the same time, make it a universal appeal. And just to talk a little bit about myself, since we will get into my story at the end of season 1, but how I came up with Imaginative Visions is that I originally had a website called Artistic Wings, as many people know. Artistic Wings was going to be something I was going to do with Imaginative Visions, where I published my comic books, my short films, and everything else, because originally I wanted to be a screenwriter. And that didn't pan out the way I wanted to, because I decided to listen to people and went, pursue and get the regular 9 to 5. So I, put off what I really wanted to do. And full circle, now here I am with my own story, with my own comic book and everything else. But it's neither here or there. But I was trying to think of a name, and I was thinking to myself, what can I do to describe what I'm going to be doing? Okay, I know I'm going to be publishing comic books. I'm going to be writing comic books. I'm also going to be doing short films. I'm going to be doing all forms of entertainment,
Mhm.
and I'm using my imagination. But of course, imagination visions, I was like, okay, that doesn't really go. Imaginary visions, it's like, okay, but imaginative, I'm imagining it. So that's how the name came about, Imaginative Visions. And it is my vision. So, and the visions of other people that I'm going to be partnering and working with down the line. And that's how the name came. So with Keenan, it's Side B Gaming, which works perfectly, especially with the way you explained it with the cassette tape. And it's something for those younger audiences. We used to have this thing called cassette tapes where we played the music. And Side B, and the crazy part is the Side B, like you said, was right, was usually the hottest songs. Was usually songs that you wanted to have to be singles, but you couldn't put it in singles because of the either the subject matter or the content that was going for it. So, what are some of the challenges of being a one-man developer?
It's really hard sometimes. Again, because there's so many, when you're looking at a video game, there's so many aspects that you can't do it all. I mean, there are some people who try to do it all and then it doesn't really work out. But you really have to be great at every aspect that you manage, because if you're not, if one thing is off, it's all off. So for instance, if I design, I have to wear one hat that says game designer. If that hat doesn't work, you play the game and it's not designed well, it's too easy, too hard. There's no carrot in front of you, in the sense of, keeping the player engaged, all these things, the game sucks, right? On the art side of it, if I do everything else right and I pick ugly art and the art, it just doesn't match, the aesthetic just doesn't match. Like that's what happened with 211. 211 CK, when I first created, the art didn't match the theme initially. And then luckily I had to come in and actually fix it. But that being said, the art has to match. And if it doesn't, guess what? It sucks. And I mean, I can keep going on and on and on, but if you think about it as well, like I always tell you, is that even after the game is done, post-production, right? Now I have to be a producer. Now I have to go and, email Apple. Now I have to email Google. Now I have to deal with that side of it. I have to be a lawyer as well when it comes to my copyright and trademark stuff. So now I'm on the phone with lawyers at 6 a.m. saying, what is going on with my paperwork? I have to get that right. And then also just as important is the marketing side of it, right? So I can bust my ass and make the best game ever. And Keenan is great. It's designed great. Your art is great. Your sound is great. And now I have to go put on a marketing hat, whole nother hat than programming, which is what I was doing this morning. So now the marketing hat, I have to understand social media and I have to keep my followers engaged and growing. And then in addition to that, I have to understand, Instagram or Apple or, Facebook ads and where to target them. How much should I spend on each platform, etc. So, and again, if that doesn't work, the game fails, and in a lot of people's eyes. So the hardest part is again, getting all of those things right.
Whew. And not to mention, so basically, you're developing the game. You are your own agent. You are your own PR. You are your own street team. You are basically doing everything. Now, thankfully, we're no longer in the 90s where you would have probably needed an agent. Now you have social media that can be your agent, that can be your marketing team. So what are some of your strategies that you've used so far for social media to really get your brand out there?
Well, one thing that actually kind of like struck gold a little bit when I created Die in the Dark was Screenshot Saturday. So I remember there was a what I do is I try to consistently post at least once a week, every other week, or something like that. And so I remember, this is such a good story for everybody. I was posting and I wasn't really getting that many likes, that many views. I'll post a picture of Die in the Dark and it would get like 10, maybe 10 likes at the time, 5 likes, and I remember I was gonna post. I just created a video about how to open a door. I just figured out programming, how, again, as a gamer, people are probably like, that isn't me. That's nothing. But as a developer, I'm like, I got the door to open and it has a sound and so I recorded it. And the idea was, I said, you know what? I'm probably going to get 5 likes, 5 views on this thing. But I said, at least I want some of my closest friends to see the game in motion, walking around, opening doors and things like that. I said, all right, I'll post it. Dude, I literally posted it at like 2 in the morning. I didn't even think about it. I said, oh, hopefully I get 5 likes from my friends. I woke up, it was at like 3,000 views. And I was like, what the hell? I think it has like 20,000 views at this point. But I got that because I used the hashtag screenshot Saturday. And as a gamer in any industry, you have to understand that where is your audience going? Which hashtags really matter to them on social media? So that hashtag brought in a lot of followers, a lot of comments, a lot of likes, a lot of interest, a lot of people added to the wish list. And as much as you can say it's luck or whatever, and it was actually trending for 2 weeks as the #1 video or / picture for Screenshot Saturday for 2 weeks on Instagram. And I'm saying that to say is that you have to be consistent on social media, and you have to not worry about how many followers you got, how many likes you got, how many, oh, I don't want to post this because it's not gonna, nobody cares. Just post it. Close your eyes and just post. Don't even check how many likes you got. Don't even check how many views you got. Just understand that there are people watching. And then in addition to that, what you're creating on your page is a story. So you can look at the story and see your progress, which is what I do with a lot of my games. I'll see, even with, if you remember, Save My Cereal, when I first showed the prototype, it literally was like a blank bowl and stuff just dropping in there. Look, the graphics and stuff was horrible. But I love that because, again, it shows the progress. But in addition to that, if somebody sees your page from, maybe somebody recommends your page, whatever. If you have a page that has like 5 posts on it, or 1 post, or no picture, people are gonna be like, why am I following this? This guy don't even post. He don't even have a picture. He don't even care about. He don't even care about this page. Why should I care? So when people go to my page, they see, wow, this guy has 200 posts. Wow, I can see a story. I can see different things that he's doing with his games. Wow, it's really encouraging. So don't worry about how many views you have now and where you came from, or about where you're going.
Whew. That is just some great wisdom there, brother. And we're gonna end this segment of Roblox because you just brilliantly described some of your obstacles, some of your biggest frustrations, and now you've surpassed your Roblox and you reached your destination. You finally dropped to 11CK while you were developing that. So how did it feel when you dropped your first game? What were your emotions? What were you going through? Was it like, or was it, or were you like me? Because I will tell you, when I first dropped Cry Hero, the first thing I was worried about was just like, all I wanted to make sure, because I knew the artwork was brilliant, because Will's a great artist. So I knew the artwork was going to be fine. My biggest concern for me was the reaction of the story, because I'm the writer. So I wanted to make sure that the story was well received, that the people will understand it. And so what was for you with 211CK, especially, and for those who don't know what 211CK is, you're going to see the showcase. You're going to see a trailer of it in our showcase section coming up soon. But the game is kind of, the feedback, you got mixed reactions because of the protagonist character. You're playing a robber who's escaping a bank robbery, correct? And the NPCs that you have to take down are police officers. So obviously,
you have to shoot out the cops.
You're basically shooting the cops. So because you got to escape. So obviously, there's been a little pushback with that. But what was your reaction? What were you feeling the day of your release? What was going through your mind?
You know what? The controversy of the game didn't bother me because I actually dealt with that. I did 3 playcrafting shows. I think 2 or 3 playcrafting shows before that. And it was a guy actually who went off on me at like playcrafting, which is, for those who know, it's like a they do video game shows. You can Google it. But they actually, a guy actually flipped out on me on playcrafting, and it was like, this is offensive, blah, blah, and he was just like pissed. And so I'm saying that to say, like, dude, I already got past that part. I didn't really care. But what got me on release day, I was more nervous that people were going to find bugs. And so for me, again, you're releasing it on so many different iPhones, so many different Androids, and I was just nervous that there were going to be compatibility issues. So I don't know if you remember when I first saw you was at the Mets game,
Yeah.
and first thing I'm like was like, how's it run? How's it look? You know what I mean? Was it glitches? Was it
Yeah.
And so I think for me that was the first thing. So on one hand, probably a week before, because you have to submit it early. It was done. It was sitting there for like a week, and I was really relieved at that point. But the day of release, I was excited, but again, I was holding my breath because A, you hope people like your work, and B, you hope that somebody doesn't say, when I get to this part, the game freezes and it doesn't work anymore. You know what I mean? So, but I worked really, really hard mid-production to fix any glitches. And even my game now, which we'll talk about later, but I mean, like my whole week last week was fixing glitches. Like I try to find the glitches way before you guys. So I've been really blessed that a lot of my games haven't had a lot of glitches.
Whew. So that was your reaction. It was just don't have any bugs.
Yeah. Hopefully it works.
Hopefully. And I think that's warranted because even with video games today, we're in an era where we have day one patches. So you could have released 211CK, but I'll patch it later.
No.
But you being an indie, I think that would be more of a detriment to you because you're not on that. You're not Capcom. You're not Activision. You're not Lucas Arts. You're not Disney or anything else like that. You can't just release something and be like, I'll patch it later. You release something that needs a lot of bugs, people are going to just like, 1 star. No, don't buy this game. Don't buy this game. And then it actually hurts your pockets. So that's, I definitely could relate to that. So you are now working on a new game, which is called FarRock Dodgeball. And we're going to show a little trailer towards the end, not at the end with our showcase. At the end of the show, we'll show the showcase of your trailers. That's how we're going to end the show. But can you tell us about a little bit FarRock Dodgeball? What's that and what inspired that game?
Oh my God. So many people always say that, like, what inspired? So many things inspired that game. It's funny. The biggest inspiration, there's two. The arcade mode, the actual, it's basically, for those who don't know, it's a dodgeball game. It's a 3-on-3 dodgeball game that includes a versus mode, 4-player versus mode, arcade mode, which is like going through, a tournament, and then also a story mode. So the arcade and versus mode was actually inspired by Street Fighter, believe it or not. So the game features a lot of supers. Each team has a different super move that they can do with the dodgeball. And the story mode was, believe it or not, inspired by my real life, but also Boys in the Hood. If you look at Boys in the Hood, you have, 3 or 4 different characters that are living in the same area, but all react to different things that happen in the hood. And my game, it's four main characters growing up in New York City as kids. They're from Queens, all 4 of them. But they go out to other boroughs to play dodgeball, and they go through, they have violence that they have to deal with. They have a New York City dodgeball tournament that they have to deal with. They have death that they have to deal with as well. Some people pass away. So you're dealing with real life and real issues that we deal with in the hood all the time in the game. But instead of using what we use as, growing up, guns and knives and fighting, all the issues are resolved with dodgeball, with the dodgeball game. So.
Oh, it's a good concept. And can you explain a little bit of some of the features that you're going to be?
Yeah, so it's funny. There's no game like this. And when I tell people that, I think they're like, oh, I'm sure there's something. There's no game like this. Like I said, not only are you getting a 4-player versus mode, right? But you're also getting, like I said, a sequential arcade mode, which again gives you 4 bosses to play, going through different areas in New York City for a dodgeball tournament. But you're also getting a story mode, like I said, dealing with some of those things. And inside that story mode, you're able to collect sneakers, which is really, really cool. And the sneakers actually help with your character's stats. Similar to an RPG, you'll be receiving experience points as you progress through the story. And those experience points, you'll be able to upgrade your player's speed, their strength, their throwing speed, etc. In addition to that, it's in New York City. So you'll be able to travel all around the map through all 5 boroughs, and actually play side quests, mini games, and things like that. I think the only game that has a hot dog eating contest at Nathan's, similar. It's not Nathan's officially, but in Coney Island, the famous hot dog. So you're living the New York life, but also you're eating the New York food as well. So obviously New York is famous for pizza, black and white cookies, which are in the game, Jamaican beef patties, for those who don't know, sticky wings, which is probably only famous in my New York world. But you're getting the famous, Cat's Deli, the pastrami sandwiches in there. You're getting all the famous New York foods as well to help replenish your character's life, and also SP gauge. So again, it's kind of like a sports RPG that is based in New York City. That again, it's nothing like any game you've ever played before.
And we are going to go into not our final segment before we go to the showcase, but we're going to end the destination with this question. What advice, because you did your origins, you did your Roblox, you got to your destination. So looking back on your journey, what advice would you give your younger self? And also, what would you give to younger developers who are just now starting out? Especially in this climate now, what advice would you give?
This is not just for developers. This isn't just for myself in the past. Somebody gave me this advice 10 years ago, and I never forgot it. And I've heard it before, but for some reason it really stuck 10 years ago. Slow and steady wins the race. And everyone has heard that before. Everyone has like, yeah, okay, whatever. But think about it. What I'm saying is, consistency. If you can, for instance, let's say, Justin, let's say you don't know how to do something, right? Let's say you want to be a pilot, right? Just whatever. You're like, I want to fly planes. Okay, I know nothing about flying planes. If you were to study flying planes every day for 6 months straight, every day, even if it's 10 minutes, it's 5 minutes, if it's 30 minutes, you watch a YouTube video one day. Next day you read a book. Next day you watch a video. Next day you rent something. Next day you go to the hangar and you talk to pilots. After 6 months, you're gonna be pretty good at this. Yeah. And so that being said, slow and steady. Sometimes we think to ourselves that, oh, I have to take my whole day off to work on this. That's why I was stuck before when I was with Live Game Dev. I was like, well, I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to meet people. But slow and steady. So if it's you 5 minutes, what I would do, Justin, before, last year, when COVID first started, was I would wake up 30 minutes before my alarm clock, and I would take 30 minutes a day to just work on my game. 30 minutes. People say, oh, 30 minutes, Keenan, that's nothing. Add it up. So we're looking at 2.5 hours a week, right? Just on weekdays. Add it up. 5 hours every 2 weeks. 10 hours every month now. I'm sneaking in 10 hours. So again, it's about slow and steady. So when I started to program, Justin, I didn't know anything about programming. I was like, and I was looking at this and I was like, this is hard. Like, what? What is a Boolean? What is a float variable? I don't know what that is. But what I did was I said, okay, Keenan, every day, just look at this. Study what a Boolean is. Study the difference between an integer and a float. Study it. And then slowly, you're going to get it. Slowly, slow and steady. The steady is consistency. The slow is not so much that we can't go quick, but it's just being consistent a little bit, little chunks at a time. And the same thing with video games. Like, Justin, when you play FarRock Dodgeball, you're going to be like, which is, by the way, coming out, Q3 2021. But when people play it, they're going to say, there's no way one person made this game. I was at GDC, Justin, last year, the year before COVID, and somebody said, oh, what games do you make? They looked at my games, and then there was this person emailed me and said, I don't think you made all these by yourself. I was partly I was offended, and then another part of me was flattered, because I said to myself, they don't see the slow and steady. For instance, and I'll finish with this. 1 minute, I'm working on UI, slow and steady. Next minute, working on AI. Next minute, I'm working on level design. Next minute, I'm working on, the controllers, control configurations. Next minute, working on levels. Like
Yeah.
you can't just do all of this stuff in one day. Slow, slow,
Okay.
slow, and steady. And that's even if you're trying to learn a craft. Okay, learn the basics first. Okay, add a little bit to it. Add a little bit to it. Add a little bit to it. Bam.
Whew. And that, folks, ends the destination. And that's just one hell of an advice. And I just want to just piggyback off what Keenan said, because I apply that directly to what I do with Imaginative Visions. Consistency. And I also and I want to quote Denzel Washington, because that's one thing that always resonated with me when he said, dreams without goals is just dreams, and ultimately fuel disappointment. I'm gonna say it again. Dreams without goals are just dreams, and you only get there by being consistent. You look at all the quote famous people successful. You don't even have to be famous, because I believe success is self-defined. Yes, will we all like to sell the big millions and millions of dollars? Of course, we all want to sell big and everything else. But I remember what Dave Chappelle said on Inside the Actor Studios, when he said that if he can make a teacher's salary doing comedy, he considers it a success, because it's still a salary. So he doesn't have to clock in. He does what he wants to do, and he still has at least over 100 grand or $60,000 a year by just doing comedy. And that always resonated with me. What you just said, you hit it right on the nail. Consistency. You have to consistency, and time management is very important. So we're gonna get into the showcase. We're gonna be right back, because we're gonna show 211 CK. We're gonna show the trailer for 211 CK, Die in the Dark, Save My Cereal, and FarRock Dodgeball. So we will be right back. So we're gonna get into the last section, which is the road ahead. So Keenan, give us a little exclusive preview of what is next for FarRock Dodgeball. What you have planned, not just for FarRock Dodgeball, what do you have planned for Cyber Game? Is there any other projects, or where do you see you going in the future?
Well, Justin, you always get the exclusive first. So, I'm always working on the next game before the current game even finishes, as you know how I do. FarRock Dodgeball, like I said, is coming out Q3 2001. Looking at September, October, we'll see. We're still not sure on the dates yet, but nonetheless, look out for that. But actually, after that, I'm gonna drop again in 2022, and this game is gonna be about stocks. Believe it or not, I feel like the financial literacy is something that we really don't learn in school. Nobody tells you what the hell a 401k is. No one tells you what the hell a dividend is. I just learned about dividends when I'm 37 years old, which is crazy. So what I want to do is I want to create a video game that actually teaches financial literacy to others in a fun way as well. So what you're going to do is my next game is actually going to be you running a evil hedge fund. And so you'll be able to, you'll see that your character is going to be able to manipulate the stock market to your favor by doing a lot of the things that some short sellers and other people, hedge funds, actually do in real life. And while playing this, not only is it going to be a lot of fun, you'll be able to do things like, I'll have like a fake CNBC office. You'll be able to beat up the security, get on TV, pump your stock up, and then sell it if you want to and flip it. You know what I mean? Like it'd be a lot of like cool things. But while you're playing this, having fun, you'll also be learning about, like I said, what is an expense ratio? What is like I said, what is a dividend? What is an ETF? Also learning about what is the price to earnings ratio? Why is that important for a stock? And so you'll be learning these things secretly, but also having a lot of fun, boosting up your stocks, and then stocks will crash and you'll be able to having to sell them and things like that. So that is coming up next, Justin. I haven't told anyone else that, by the way.
Well, the world knows now.
There you go.
So we thank Keenan for that exclusive, and that is we're gonna any closing remarks, of course, obviously plug how can people reach Cyber Gaming, how can they follow you? So give your plugins. CyberGaming.com, again, SIDE, just the letter B, gaming.com. You can also find me on Instagram, Twitter, as well as Facebook, and YouTube as well, of course. So find me in any of those places. Also have a Google Play store page, as well as a Apple store page. You can find us there. But then besides that, just Google it. It's everywhere, baby. Yes, and 211CK is available on your iOS and Android devices. So it's Save My Cereal, which is a free game, by the way. Let me just throw it out there. Save My Cereal is free. Die in the Dark is on Steam. You can buy that. It's for to play for PC. And FarRock Dodgeball. And Mac as well. Sorry about that. And FarRock Dodgeball is coming soon, as you guys saw from the video portion. You saw that in the showcase. Of course, you can reach us at Imaginative_Visions on Instagram, ImaginativeVisions.com on Facebook. If you're watching this on ImaginativeVisions.com, because ImaginativeVisions.com got the first week exclusive, and then it'll be on YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, like, share, and subscribe, hit that notification bell. And we are going to get out of here. Keenan, it was a pleasure. Thank you. One hell of a journey, brother. I wish you the best of luck. It is going to be one hell of a ride. I'm going to be there with you, obviously. So we're going to get to this outro right now. Everybody, later days. Catch you later.
Thank you for joining us for Imaginative Visions Journeys. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from Imaginative Visions, you can visit imaginativevisions.com.